All right. Hello, all. Welcome to Low Code Campfire. This is episode number 134 for February 16th. It's Open Lines Friday, so we'll talk about, well, whatever you want to. My name is Dale Warner. I'm head of support for Plant and App, joined capably by Patrick Anderson, technical success manager. Man, I can almost get that out today. Anyway, so yeah, let's get into it. This is an event we do every Friday, 10 a.m. Central Time, and it's a all skill levels welcome meeting. It's intended to be a community gathering where we share what we're doing with low code, talk about the challenges, and see if we can help each other solve issues. So bring something to show. I hope that you'll join us and participate today. We put all these out on YouTube, youtube.com/plantandapp. So there's the Low Code Campfire playlist. There's also the Low Code Cafe playlist. So lots to look at out there. We run this agenda. We do introductions, since this is an informal gathering. We just say hello, and then we'll go around the campfire. We always do first call. We sometimes get into some of these other things, and then after an hour or so, we go off the record and go into our afterglow segment. So do engage with us, show and tell. You can use the chat window however you'd like to. If you've got noise going on behind you, please mute. Other than that, be nice. You can submit questions and topics in advance, either by emailing me directly. Some of you have my super secret email address. Other than that, you can use this QR code and it will set you up to send the question topic in advance. You can also give us feedback on what you thought about a given session. So with that, hello, everyone. See, it's a group of regulars today.
Hello there.
Good morning.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday indeed.
Good morning, everyone.
Hey, Dennis. All right. Who has first call? Somebody got something going on, want to ask about?
Yes, if anybody, it's not, I don't know. It's probably stupid.
Oh, no. We don't have
Um,
stupid.
I've been trying to use your thing I saw the other day, which was you create a list from Excel, you put it in your file, your folder structure, and then import it into a table, because that was really great to manipulate things and all that. But I'm having problems with a time field. It's the field type is time. And then when I'm importing it, I like to create new time log, and that particular field is just giving me a lot of trouble. And I even created a SQL token, my token, to try to make it in the right format. I tried it in Excel before I even imported it. That didn't work. So anyway, I'm kind of stuck on it about how to get it in the right format to be able to put it into a table.
All right. So are you you're iterating through the records from Excel? You've got a list?
Yeah.
All right. And you're using a create action, for example, to into an entity.
Yes. Execute actions for each list entity.
Right. And then every time that you're in that, every time you're iterating through it, you're creating a record or updating a record. So you're just at the end of the day, the problem is trying to work with our time field.
Yes.
Trying to send a value to time field and having it formatted correctly.
Right.
Patrick will confirm that date and time fields are the bane of our existence.
Well,
next question.
Well,
Yeah, next question. Yeah, exactly. Moving on.
Well, do you want me to show you what I've done, and maybe
I don't think so. I think it's just let's do a question or two though, just to make sure the field type that you're working with is it's a time field.
Yes.
All right. So I have this test entity that I work with a lot, and I'm just going to make sure I have a time field on it. Patrick, do you know the answer so you can keep me from stumbling around here? Or
No, I would have to play around with it. Yes, but I'm sure that it's
a format issue?
yeah, it's that same error that we get if you try to pull a date in as a text value or something like that, and yeah.
Yeah, the
Well,
actual error is failed to get property value for property, and then if I actually get the error from the logs, it's that it's not in the right format,
Right.
HH:/MM.
So I'm going to add a field type here. Let's see if we can just explore it and figure it out. We've got update time. We're setting it to a time, and so I'll save that changes, and then we'll go look at my books entity. Any research that you can do behind the scenes to make me look really smart, Patrick, would be great. All right, you guys hear a strange echo? I'm in an undisclosed location today. I didn't know if how the sound was, but
Are you undercover?
no, I'm actually going to go see a basketball game tomorrow sometime in
cool.
Austin.
Oh, cool.
So you can't do anything with an error message, and so we need to go to book and take a look at it. Have update time. One of the things that I do, yeah, sometimes it helps is to try and figure out, see how we've done it, right? 11,
Yeah, and I can look in the raw table and I see exactly what it looks like. It's actually, because I've done it from the front side too with the form, and it's HHMMSS dot and then a bunch of zeros. So it's actually in that longer format, although the error says it just needs to be, it says, for example, HH:/MM. And I don't need anything more precise than that. And in my token, I've cast it as time, and that didn't work. So then I cast it as time and then as a variable, a string, and that didn't work. And so I then cast it as time, string, and then only take the left 5 so that it was just HH:/MM. And none of that works.
So
And did you go ahead? Yeah.
no, I was going to go back and reassure Jen that this is not a stupid question. This is hard stuff.
It is.
Let's see,
I
it
was
says
going to say, did you try just outputting so something to either log or to an error message to see what it's actually when you use that token, what's actually being
right. Well, yeah, I can actually just like input anything into the token and just see what it looks like. And I've done that, and
but it
it
might be
runs
different when it comes from Excel. That's what I'm saying. When it's actually in use, it's
yeah. And when I do import it from Excel, put it in use, it says time UTC input value needs to be in a valid time format, e.g. HH:/MM or HH:/MM:SS. Additional information, failed to get value for property start time of toggle entry, blah, blah, blah. And I tried also just changing the format in Excel, but that just changes the display. It doesn't actually change the value of the what's in the cell.
Okay, so I'm showing this coming out with a value of 1135 is what this, whoops, not that one. The update time is the value here that's being shown, and that's also the same value that's being used in the update or the add. So all right. So this looks like the format that it wants, but that's a little bit of a mystery. Let's see if in fact if we can use it. So I'm going to go to configuration and try to make a workflow that edits that entity. I know this is a roundabout way of answering your question, but it's my process.
So Ben was saying that Excel stores it in ticks. So I might need to convert to an actual time value. But in my token, I have the very first thing is cast the input, TK and params, as time. So that's the very first thing that happens to the token. Then I translate
Just so you
it
know, you
yeah.
cannot cast ticks into anything. Ticks
Okay.
is a numeric value. You have to do the mathematical formula to convert ticks to an actual time and then cast to what you want. Ticks in and of itself is just a number. It's, you know, like 2 billion something, whatever. It's the ticks from a specific date. So let's say January 1st, 1980, the number of ticks from that day to now, or to whatever the date time is. So there's no direct cast. You can't just say cast it because it's going to say, well, this is a numeric value. What do I do with it? It doesn't know what its original intent is, what it means. So you have to actually do the math first, convert the ticks into something that it's known, and then, you know, from there move to what you have to do.
But does this look something like the error that you're getting, Jen?
Yeah, close to that.
And then if you look in the
just put it
actual
in a
log,
message. Yeah, and then I actually
Yeah.
put it in a message so I could get it in the output right there instead of having to go back and forth to the admin logs. So I just put the on error, create, put message into a token, exception
Yep.
message into a token. So I could see it right there on the screen. Because I got tired of going back and forth and,
Sure.
for
So this is the value. I mean, I'm just hard coding, trying to send a value, updating a time on a book, and it's not working. So this is a good representation of the problem. If we could solve this, we could figure out how to what we need to do with the Excel data that's coming in. It makes me think there's some magic happening, and I'm going to see if we can capture the magic. So within our book form, and in my case, I am going to use our the action we've talked about in Campfire weeks past, to get token values, and that's one that's available on Campfire and will soon be part of the product, but not part of the product yet. So I'm going to say add get context tokens JSON, and I'm gonna move this up here if I can. And what I'm going to create is something called tokens. So there's a token called tokens, and then in my error message, instead of all this, I'm just going to output tokens. So this is going to get everything, and I'm hoping that one of the tokens has a value, that the time token has a value that was hidden and is being used implicitly and might reveal to us what we need to be doing here. So we'll use our form. We'll show the values. We get a lot of values. Update time. So there's an ISO in 2335 format. And that's probably the one that's using. So 2335 without the AM, PM. So let's go back to this simple example. And see if that's what it's wanting. Yep. So I think when you're using our actions and you're trying to update a time, the format that it's expecting is a 24-hour clock format without any AM PM indicator. If you were to make sure that your Excel ended up formatting it down like that, I would expect it to work.
Yeah, the Excel looks like that. I did format it to be, you know, like 1300.
With no AM, PM, 13.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you look at that's what the display is. But if you look, of course, at the formula bar, when you click in the cell, you can see what's actually stored. And it is the full date with hour, minute, second, AM, PM.
Right.
That's what's actually stored in the cell.
So when you're iterating through, it needs to take whatever's in that date field and cast it into this format.
Yeah, and that's what my token seems to be doing, but it's not doing. It's not working.
Yeah, and I go back to, I mean, I think that what we'll ultimately have to do is take, when you're doing the import, do some output into a log, into the event log, or into error message that shows exactly the value that's being pulled from Excel.
Okay.
Because it I go back to Ben's comment, as a possibility, and so I think there's that your token is doing what you expect with the value that you're expecting is being pulled, but we need to know for sure exactly what we're getting from the Excel file.
Right.
Yeah.
That's like a good idea.
Yeah. So it would be along the lines of, we've done this before together, Jim, where we comment out everything else and do nothing but just log something to the event log, or output an error message, one of those two.
Right. Yes.
So aside from, I mean, I hope that gets you what you need to solve the problem, and I'm sure you and Patrick can pick it up and resolve it from there. But aside from that, it's kind of an unfortunate thing that's part of our product that when you have a time field and you're trying to set it through our actions, the actions don't clearly indicate the format that it needs, right? So here we're doing partially update book and So we say we're updating time and we're giving a value. You have to know what the correct format of the value is.
I just did what you said, Patrick, and I put in the chat what the value actually is, which is what Ben said, which is ticks.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do you have control over the Excel spreadsheet?
I do.
So, for example, you could probably write a formula in the next column that converts that into a string that is.
Yeah, I tried that. I tried that one. Actually, Ben put in the I searched and found a somewhat of an answer, but Ben put in the chat a cast with
Yep.
the token that I'm
Cool.
going to give a try. So
Yeah.
hopefully, maybe I'll do that first and then be able to use the rest of my token and see what happens. Thanks, Ben
Nice.
and
All
Patrick
right.
and Dale.
No problem. Well, we all learned something, so it was a very good question.
Well, the thing is, like, I think programming is just not running out of ideas, and I hit a wall. So
Yes.
that's why I like this group. Thank you.
We all are familiar with walls.
All right. Somebody else have a second call?
I always have something to ask.
Good.
And in fact, I put it in as a support ticket this morning, but as long as if no one minds, I'll toss this idea out. It might help some people. I have a rather complex XML that I'm receiving, and I need to parse it. I know the actions that you have, but the complexity of it is what's throwing me off. The application is that I have a client, it's a county government, and the county wants to show information about the inmates that are currently incarcerated. So the record is the XML is inmates, and then inside is inmate, and then parameters like name and a couple of others, and there's three different field types, field structures that I don't know how to handle. The first one is charges, because sometimes it's not just one, but multiple charges. And so as you traverse the inmate record in XML, you get to a tag called charges, and inside charge, and then a few parameters inside that, and then another charge a few times that. So it's nested, right? Is that description clear? How do you handle nested?
It is.
Okay.
Don,
so that's one of the problems, and I'm not sure, how to handle that. And then there's a couple of other weird ones as well. I would be happy to just stop there and see if there's some help there. And if you want to hear the other ones, we can go into those too.
I have, because you gave me the heads up, because you did the ticket, I've done the work. So is it okay with you that if I show this XML?
Yes. It's generic. It's not an actual person. I just made up.
Just
and that's fine too. Yeah, and that's
All
fine too. As far as the,
I was going to say, can you mute my name so it's not shown?
Oh yeah, I cleared. Yeah, I cleared the stuff out about Dennis, so no worries.
So this is the XML that Don provided. Give me just a second to pull it out here. And try and get it all on the screen here if I can, most of it anyway. So we have inmate and Joe, and so this is an input format. You can't control what it looks like, so you just have to parse it.
I have to parse. I have to deal with it. So there's, as you can see at the top of the page, the first one is kind of weird. The height parameter is, they give you a range. So I've got two parameters inside a height. So that's the first one. The second one is hair color. And instead of just saying hair color brown and hair color, they have a value parameter in there. So, and then the third one is the multiple charges.
So all of these are pretty easy. Just wanted to make sure, first of all, that you're using the parse XML into JSON tokens action.
Yes.
And then so I'm going to skip ahead to, so we're parsing this and I'm parsing it out to something called J. It doesn't matter what the base token is, but I'm parsing it to J. And then in my output, this is where you skip to the end. This is the answer. So height, you can get to height low by saying, and let me make this a little bigger. So J colon, and then you give the path. Inmates height low. So long as it's not an array, you can get to things by following this path.
Okay.
And so the hair color ends up being the same thing, just a different path.
Sure. That makes sense.
The charges is an array. And so that's a problem. I can't I was able to skip quickly to the end of this because I again used my proprietary action to get context tokens JSON. So after I did my parse to J, I said, take everything that's in context now and put it in tokens, a token called tokens. So this lets me look at what is inside of J, right? Does that make sense?
No.
Okay. Well, here's the problem. When you do parse XML into JSON,
Got it.
It tells you what it's going to do. And it tells you in these instructions here, it tells you
Yes.
the format of how to get to the things that you're after.
Got it.
Um,
So I followed what you had in there that charges is J inmate charges. I
right.
followed that.
All right. So once you have so J inmate charges
Right.
is an array, and you so all right, let's run this just to show where we are. The point is, I did an extra step, this thing where I'm putting it out into tokens, and I find it useful. It's not a necessary step, but I find it useful. So this is showing that we're getting the, I called it height, but this is the low height, 69. We got the hair
Sure.
color out using that thing. And then charges is what I'm returning as charges is an array. And so what you would need to do now would be to take this charges and process it as iterate through it. You could turn that into a list, for example, or parse that into a separate JSON as another possibility. But probably the thing to do would be to iterate over that, by create a list and iterate over it. So would you like to see what that looks like?
Yes, I think that's the next question. So after you do the parse into JSON, then you need to do a for loop. So JSON turn it into a list.
Right. So let's give it a try here. I'm going to make some room for myself. Actually,
That's how you do it.
I'm going to turn charges into a list. The list name is going to be, we'll say, charges list.
Got it.
And for my output here, instead of outputting this mess of tokens, I'm going to say charges. Whoops. I'm going to get the count, which this is just a debugging step for me to see if this returns 2, then I've done it right.
Yes.
So it isn't the output that you want. It's just, again, part of my process. Figuring out if I've got it right. No, so we probably have to do charges charge. See
Yeah.
how there's okay, so
Yep.
I missed.
Charges dot charge. That makes sense.
So let's try again. And a reminder, anytime you're working with JSON, it's case sensitive. You'll make yourself crazy if you're trying to do the wrong caps. All right, now we have a count of 2, so that's a good sign. So I think charges list is probably good. So now let's make a little room and we'll iterate through this. And I'm going to actually start with, I'm going to put the charges, just illustrate that we can do something with these, right? So I'm going to create a token called charge report, let's say. And then it's just going to be blank. And so we'll add to that in our each list, in our for loop here. So we're going to execute actions for each list entry. We're going to go through the charge list, and every time,
Charges list.
Yeah, I think it might be. Check your clipboard, maybe.
no, I didn't put it on the clipboard.
Okay.
But good point. Let's be clean about this. So we created the list and it's charges list. Yep. And we're going to loop. And every time we do it, we're going to make this charges report longer. And so plus, and now it's charges list colon, and then what's in the charges list.
Charge description. Let me, I can swing by and pull that out of where I put it. Just the word description. There's 2 things. There's description and there's charge code.
Just going to copy these so that we have them again with the cases necessary. So every time it takes charge report and adds to it. And then, so now we need charge report on our output. So it iterated through them and added them one by one. Does that make sense?
Got it. Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
So the one then that you were really having trouble with is, we need to create a charge list from this thing. Drop down. And then do a create a list from that and then iterate it.
Got it. So I'm waiting on the client right now to say, what do you want to do with that? Do I need to actually keep that separately, that list, and actually make another table of entries, or can I just turn it into a comma separated list string and drop it into the main record and leave it at that?
Yeah, if it, depending on what you're going to do with it, you might just, you're ending up with JSON, which is very readily parsable. You can do anything with it. If they, whatever format they want is great. If they are undecided or you want to be able to do many things with it, if you just take this JSON and put that into the record, now you can do anything with it when you're displaying.
Holy cow. I hadn't thought of that. You mean like my the database, the entity that I create, I just create rows of JSON?
Well, so let's say you're extracting, maybe you're extracting the hair color and the height and the name and putting that in there. And then for the charges, you could just store the JSON for charges into the charges. So now when let's say if the goal is to create a display of Joe Smith.
Right, exactly. I was planning on creating a list. So using Action Grid. So my data source was going to be my entity, my list of entities, or my list of
right. And so potentially when you dig into Joe Smith, you could just iterate through. You could use the JSON and turn it into whatever pretty JSON that you want, or pretty HTML that you want. If it's always going to be the same format, you could produce the charges in that format. But if you leave it, you mentioned putting it in a comma separated. Well, that works, but leaving it in JSON saves you the work, and you can easily manipulate it when you're at runtime, right?
Okay, yeah. So in the grid, then I would put the entity that I create in this step of processing the XML, I create a table of inmates, and each inmate has a charges field in their record, and that is the JSON of the charges. Then in the action grid for the data source, I bring up the table, and then I need to create a calculated field or just the field. I didn't know that I can put actions in an element in Action Grid, in a field in Action Grid.
Again, if you go the method of storing it as JSON, then you could potentially use a token to convert the JSON into whatever pretty format that you want.
Oh, okay, got it.
You know what I would be tempted to do? Just as save it as a comma separated list and save it as JSON, and call the other field charges JSON, and that way you have it available to do other things with it if you need to. That I would be tempted to do that, but I don't know.
Got it. Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Good one. Thanks for asking the question. And yeah.
Thanks for the help. That was great.
All right. We're up to third call. It's taken us 20 minutes per problem here. We've got 20 minutes left. I do, of course, have something in my back pocket to talk about. I threatened a new feature here. Let's see what do we got. Mark is here. Actually, he submitted in advance.
This might be a good time on the tail end of what we just looked at. It's pretty similar.
Man, it's exactly, that's the question. Wow.
It just flows right into it.
We called
All
it.
I could show my screen. That would probably help, but Dale, did you already do the work on this one too?
I didn't. I just dropped it on the presentation.
All right, so yeah, I think I will if that's okay.
Please do. Let's figure out how to stop sharing. There we go.
It's really similar. I don't think that I pulled my solution out of what you just talked about. So let's look at it. I think I need to see this one. Okay, you should be looking at an entity full of data, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So this is a table or an entity, and this column called QS params has all that JSON in it. Very similar to what you were just talking about. That I'm referring to it by looking up the GUID, which is in the same row. What I need, I'm filling this JSON dynamically at times. So sometimes I fill it, then it rides there for a while, then under certain circumstances, it gets refilled. It gets cleaned out and refilled. And it's a lot of stuff that controls things. Like it winds up making this appearance. So it fills the columns, it knows what data it's supposed to be showing, it knows the placement of, this is a photo contest, first, second, third place, and so on. So all that data in there fills that in, and it sometimes needs to be changed. And so as a programmer, sometimes I need to be able to see this data and be able to read it. I can sift through here, but data gets long and moves around, so it makes it harder to see. I'd love to see something similar to this from your Code Beautify, Dale. I'd like to be able to pop that up on my screen so if I can see the data that's in there. Are you with me?
Right. So you want to have a beautified or prettified JSON.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd like to be able to pop that up on a page that I'm working on. And the difference between what I was paying attention to, what Don's got going on and what I have going on is I have a variable number of rows. Like sometimes I won't have these last four and other times I will. And in the future, I'm going to have new ones that I don't today know what their labels are. So I can't refer to them by name yet. What I would like to see is something that is dynamic and just makes a list of everything that shows up in JSON, and it just dynamically throws it onto either an action grid that pops up, or it could be a form with a stat text box that I fill dynamically, or something else. So the question is, I got this beautiful black page ready to go, empty page. How do I show all that beautiful data in a human-friendly way?
So I did play with this a little bit, and there's two solutions that have come to mind, and I haven't made either of them work yet. One is that within JavaScript, there's a thing, JSON.stringify, that is intended for this purpose to make it look pretty. But I haven't, how many times have I told you I'm not a JSON guy, or excuse me, a JavaScript guy. So I haven't been able to figure it out how to implement it. But JSON.stringify will take poorly or unformatted JSON and make it pretty. So that's one thing. Another thing is, back when I did the Low Code Cafe that included tabulator, and that was, I think, having to do with, I did it, we had data audit triggers that returned JSON, and you didn't know the column, what JSON was going to be returned. Anyway, it's possible to use tabulator to display unknown JSON in a table. So that's another approach. But I kind of like the stringify one. I just hadn't figured it out. And thought it'd be great to bring to this group in case anybody else has already solved it.
Well, Dale, I'll happily investigate stringify and tabulator. I can actually run with that. You know, a lot of times what you really need is just somebody to give you something you can chase down, and you can take it from there.
Yep. Well, and I didn't come up with that on my own. That was a GPT. I have this, I want that. How do I get there? And it mentioned stringify. So
thanks for that reminder about
that-
GPT. I didn't
that's
ask.
always the pattern these
That
days
guy.
that I use. What do I have? What do I need?
I've been using that a lot. I'm surprised I didn't think of it this time.
Good. All right. Well, so we expect a report back by next Friday.
Oh, you know me, dog and a bone. I'll have it figured out soon. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Share back here. All right. Nah, that was left over from last time. Let's get rid of that. I had two things that have come up on support that might be fun to talk about, you know, in a geek kind of way. Anybody use the autocomplete URL on a text field or would like to see how that works?
Say that again. Auto URL.
So text fields, let's close these other tabs. Text fields have an autocomplete functionality.
Yeah.
That you can use a let's get this out of here. That you can use a API to get drop-down values. So this is just a text field, and I type stuff, and it queries the API and gets values. And it's really cool, really easy to do, but there's a couple of rules that you got to follow along pretty closely. So here's the text box in question. Most time we put text box down and just don't even look at some of this stuff, right? But there is this autocomplete URL parameter that you just can fill in. So if you have a URL that, excuse me, if you have an API that will provide data for this, you can just point it to it. And then this text, and this text is a little bit cryptic. I've submitted a change to improve what this is saying, but essentially what's going on is that if you have a URL in here, that it will submit to that URL and provide search text. If you can either explicitly say search text equals query with this with query in braces, and it knows whatever you're typing is going to get put in there. So the API is getting the characters. Or if you don't do that, it automatically creates something called query for you and puts the characters in there. So let's see, it's probably useful to use the inspect and to see how this works. I'm gonna give me a second and I'll dock this. So on our network tab, there it is. So if I start typing in this box, it's automatically firing off a query that has query equals Dale. So it's sending to my URL, adding query equals whatever I type. If I change this, it fires off a new query. And so if you're searching through, if you have an API that has, you know, tons and tons of records, and you want to just filter out and return them based on what you type, this is a good pattern to use. When the characters that you type trigger the API to run, the API returns a payload that's what happens here. Here's the response. Yeah. So this is giving a response back, text and value. That's what the API is designed to do. To take the query, run it, and return back text and value. So making sense yet? So why would you use this as compared to, say, drop down with autocomplete? Drop down with autocomplete, perhaps unexpectedly, runs the entire query and fills up and returns all the values before you begin to type. So if you had a scenario where you had 10,000 records that returned, it returned 10,000 records, and you wanted to use them to drop down with autocomplete, your web page is going to get 10,000 values. So as you start typing, it's being able to pick from those. If you, so when you're doing drop down with autocomplete and it's short, right? If there's only 100 records, it's like completely unnoticeable in most cases, and so works just fine. But if it's a very large number, maybe that's a bad pattern for you to implement. Makes the page too heavy. So by putting in a autocomplete URL on a text box, you can get it to query the API, return only the qualifying records. It doesn't return anything until you start typing. So perhaps you're only out of the 10,000, whatever they type lets you eliminate it down to 200 or 5. It saves, and it does it at the tail end instead of as the page loads. I take it from your silence that you're all amazed. So I'm gonna.
So Dale, when you compare that to the dropdown with autocomplete and you're pre-populating, the other thing the autocomplete gives you is a validation. You can only pick from something in the list. With the text box, would you be able to add new entries there? Does it have to match something?
Yes, we can submit this form without having a valid value. So now you would have to do your own validation, for example. So you can see I was able to submit the text box with that.
Okay. And then there would be some way we would be able to validate that it is in that list if we wanted validation as opposed to the dropdown.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you can do, and it describes it in the help text a little bit. You can get to the value of the thing as so there's text and value, right? And when we're doing this, you got text and value. So there's a 2 or a 6 or whatever, a 58. You can get to the value. So if they've typed their own thing, the value is going to be blank or null. It's a JavaScript level thing, but it can be done. Alternately, you could just test the value that comes back, do another lookup back to your data source and say, and return true, false as to whether it exists. Does that make sense?
It does.
Notice here, as I change this, I'm going to refresh the screen here so I can hopefully show this clearly. So I'm going to clear out my calls and notice that we get a query every time this changes. I have a drop down with autocomplete here, and I'm typing into it and I don't get any queries going on in the network. So this is my indication that everything has to be on the page already for this to work. Right, so drop down with autocomplete is pre-queries and gets everything back. And if you trace the network tab, you'd be able to see that happening. Anyway, one thing that is not terribly plain, and actually I'm going to go back and get into inspect again, is that text and value are again case sensitive. So when we look at the query and we see what comes back, it's in order for this mechanism to work, you must have text with a capital T and value with a capital V to work. So your API endpoint must return text and value. And if it doesn't, then it'll appear to not work. The other thing that I wanted to point out, I've got a bug report in for it, but this text box with this feature doesn't, we've got a CSS bug, and without adding on page builder, so without adding some CSS, it might overwrite, might not look right. So there's some, if you happen to use this and it doesn't look right, you might want to use add some CSS to your page. It's the autocomplete suggestion. There's missing a couple of things and we'll fix that. But without this, it looks funny. So just realize that we can give you the CSS that you need if it's missing. And okay, with that, we've now coasted to the end of our hour. We didn't get to our new feature because we want to start talking. I'll just introduce it. We want to start talking about our Low Code Development Playbook. We have, we're starting to develop standards for internal projects where when we use Plant an App for customers, that we do things in a certain way so that regardless of what developer, we get a more consistent result. And so it's just going to be a series of best practices. So I was hoping to talk about these. We didn't get into it, but for example, I hope to come with an approved policy for us internally to show you what we're doing, and then a draft policy. So for example, our current approved policy is don't use absolute URLs in your code, because if it gets moved to a different website, say from development to production, you've got to go find all those things. And if you miss them, bad things can happen. Either it doesn't work, that's the best case. The worst case is that you might be redirecting to a page that back to your development site, or you might be working in development and get flipped to your production site, not know it, and start changing data. A user might change data because they don't know where they are. So we have this new policy, don't use absolute URLs. We'll get into that, what it looks like next time. But we have another one that we are writing up, trying to avoid using conditions on actions in workflows, that there's a better pattern to do that rather than, because the conditions are a little bit out of the way, and this just takes extra time to figure out what's going on. So being more visual, taking advantage of our BPM and engine that we've implemented. So we'll talk more about that next time. If you have, I would be interested in your comments of when we have these policies, especially the draft ones, looking to see if you have ideas about how these things should be. And then as we get into this over time, I'll be interested in what patterns you use that you might consider to be best practices. So with that, we've made it 1 minute over our hour. I'm going to say thanks for coming to Low Code Campfire, and we will be here again next week. Stick around for a few minutes and we'll go into our Afterglow unrecorded session. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next week.